Hey, what's up guys, Guardian here, coming guys with a deck profile today on my Dragonic Overlord deck, updated for set 5 of OverDress. Overlord is pretty much the only Dragon Empire deck that I own now, but I still think it's really fun to play, and we got the upgrade of the End finally for this deck, which is really cool. A very iconic unit from the original Vanguard season, and without further ado, let's get stuck into the deck, and I'll show you guys what I'm playing in my The End deck. So, to start with the right deck, of course, we have Undo for the starter. The name's not particularly important, but it is in theme with the Dragonic Overlord ride line, so we're sticking with Undo. And then, of course, with the grade 1, we have the Embodiment of Armor Bar. So when you ride on the Harlem on top of him, you get to counterblast to search a deck for a grade 1 and add it to your hand. So it can basically search a perfect guard, which is pretty good. So if you don't have one in the early game, you can just search one out and then have that for later in the game. So that's pretty cool. But if you don't need a PG, like let's say you've already opened one up, you could search for one of your other grade 1s that could give you a bit of utility. So that's pretty cool as well. So in order to get that skill, of course, we need to ride our Dragon Knight Nahalem. So he has a skill of when you ride on top of it with an Overlord, you get a column to the rearguard circle, which is pretty cool. So you get a free rearguard, and he's got a really nice rearguard skill in that you can Soul Blast 1, and your Overlord Vanguards and your Nahalem get 5,000 power. So this is really nice because Nahalem now becomes a 15k attacker. So if you put an 8k booster behind that, it'll make it 23, which is pretty good. But then also your Vanguard gets 5k power, and it's until the end of the turn, which is pretty good with Overlord because obviously it restands, so it can carry that power on over to its next attack, which is pretty cool. So the last card in the right deck, obviously, is Dragonic Overlord. Now, the reason I'm playing the normal Dragonic Overlord in the right deck is mainly because of the End, and that it has a continuous skill that you need to keep the Dragonic Overlord in the soul for it to get a benefit. But I'll get to that when we get to the end. So Dragonic Overlord, of course, it has the Vanguard and Rearguard skill of when it attacks a Rearguard, your opponent cannot call cards from the hand to the Guardian Circle. Now, they can still call Blitz orders, of course, but that doesn't really come up too often. It depends on the deck, but regardless, it does give you a nice, easy way to trigger his second skill, in that when his attack hits, you can counterblast 1, discard a card from your hand, and then restand this unit, but it gets drive -1. What I like about the skill in this deck is that it's more or less kind of a filter option, so if you're able to get the skill off, you can easily just filter your hand and get an extra drive check to get an extra card deeper in the deck, which is pretty good, especially when you want to be searching for the end, right? So yeah, and then if you don't have a Rearguard to attack, you can at least apply on-hit pressure to your opponent's Vanguard on the turn 3, which, with a restanding Vanguard, if you can get a crit with that, that's pretty pressurizing. So yeah, I do like the turn 3 that Dragonic Overlord does bring still, and like I said, I like sticking with him just because you do need him for the end to not do any hard minusing when you're doing the End's restand skill. But talking about the End, actually, let's go over his skill since we've been talking about him. So, of course, with grade 3s in the main deck, we have 4 copies of Dragonic Overlord the End. So, yeah, I really love this guy's artwork. He just looks so badass. But, yeah, so his skill is Continuous Vanguard. During your turn, if your soul has Dragonic Overlord, this unit's drive check cannot decrease by card effects, and it gets 5,000 power, which is pretty cool. So now, your The End will become 18, but then if you give it a 5k boost from, say, your Nahalem skill, it'll now become 23,000, which is actually a pretty good number, magic number-wise, especially when you're restanding this afterwards. So that's actually not too bad. But yeah, its main skill is, once per turn, at the end of the battle that this unit attacked, you can counterblast 1, discard 2 cards, stand this unit, and it gets drive -1. Now, obviously, the drive -1 won't occur because we have Dragonic Overlord and the Soul. So the really cool thing with this is that you can attack with it for 23, twin drive, restand it, and then attack for 23 again, and any other triggers that you got from the first twin drive, but then attack it for the second time with a second twin drive because of the continuous skill. So yeah, this is really cool, and this is the preferred way that I decided to go for because I don't like the idea of putting this in the right deck and then having to do, a hard minus every time with the restand skill. I feel like it's like an all or nothing strategy at that point, to try rush as much as possible with the restand. I kind of like the long game with this deck and prolonging it to like the turn 4, turn 5, and trying to grind it out. And I've actually put some defensive cards in this deck to try keep the game going so that I can get to the late game. So I'll go over those in the deck later on. So yeah, 4 copies of the End, really, really cool card, and like I said, love that artwork. Really, really cool. Okay. So for the grade 2s, we are playing the 4 copies of Burning Horn Dragon. So this is a really cool support card that Overlord got, in that when it's placed, you can counterblast 1, look at 7 cards on the top of the deck, add an Overlord to your hand, and then if you did not add a card, you countercharge. So it actually pays back for its cost if you end up whiffing with its skill, which is really good because that gives you the ability to use multiple of these cards like in the same turn. So yeah, it's really great consistency to help get to the end, which is really, really nice. So yeah. So the extra 4 copies of the Burning Horn, it kind of feels like you're playing 8 the Ends in the deck, which is really nice. But it does have a Regard skill in that when your Vanguard with Overlord attacks, he gets 5,000 power. Now, this is pretty good because, of course, your Overlord's going to be attacking twice mainly. So this will become a 20k beat stick. So any small power increments that you can give to Burning Horn will allow it to get over to the next magic number threshold of like 23. That's actually pretty cool. So I quite like the Burning Horn. It's a really great consistency piece. And it's also just a really nice attacker as well. So 4 copies of this. Very, very nice return of Burning Horn Dragon. So next with the grade 2s, we are playing the 4 copies of Peripherate Burner Dragon. So this is a new grade 2 that came out with set 5. It's kind of like Togachi, the grade 1, where you could discard it to put it into your soul instead. This one's a little bit different though, in that you have to do the discard during the battle phase in order to put it into the soul. But regardless, it's another card that you can put into the soul so that you can actually generate some soul charge in the deck towards your Nahalem skills, obviously. But also, when you do this effect, you get to give one of your units 5,000 power, which is actually pretty good. So, for example, you could give the 5k power to like a Burning Horn Dragon, which, like I said, it's like 20,000. So a 5k boost will make it 25, which is a much better number. So that's pretty cool. But then one utility that I do like with this card is with the End, in that the End can get to 23,000 pretty easily. But one of the funny things in set 5 is the new heal triggers that came out with the skills. That can become a 25k shield if you're using it on a unit that's already attacked, right? So it's kind of designed in a way to stop multi-attacked units, which is kind of awkward, right? Because that's what the End is. But the cool thing with this is that we could attack for 23, restand him, but then give that 5k power after discarding it to the End, making him 28. And then if they use those heal triggers, they'll go up to 38,000 in terms of an overall power. But being 28 on the End will actually make that attack still a wonder pass. So I actually quite like the Perfect Burner Dragon, not only for the extra soul charging, but also the 5k power increment can actually make magic numbers a lot easier to meet and getting over certain thresholds. So that's actually pretty cool. So I do like it for that reason, and obviously the main thing is that you can get more soul from it to keep you on the Harlems going, basically. So yeah, so 4 copies of that. And then we were speaking of Nahalem, so obviously we're playing 3 extra copies of Nahalem because his, like I said, the power skill is just really, really important, and we need to make sure that we can keep it going to keep our Overlords buffed up and attacking for big numbers. So yeah, so 3 copies of Nahalem to go with the one on the right deck. Then next I'm playing the 3 copies of Berserk Dragon. So I actually decided to cut this down to 3. I've been playing 4 for a while, but I feel like 3 is fine just because the spot removal aspect of it doesn't come up too often. And with this deck, you kind of want to preserve your Counterblast for other stuff like the Burning Horn, the Bar in the right deck, the Dragonic Overlord in the right deck as well. And then you then need Counterblast to preserve for the End as well. So it could be a bit sketchy with this card, but the one thing I like with Berserk Dragon is that he's still a good 15k beat stick, just because he does get 5k power as long as you've got an Overlord Vanguard. So he's still a good attacker, and the utility of his skill can come up every now and then if it's needed. So I like having 3 just to have ease of access to it, but if I don't need him, I can always just discard him, not feel too bad about it, right? So that's okay. So 3 copies of Berserk Dragon. And then next, for the last grade 2 of the deck, I'm playing 2 copies of Ethan. So Ethan, really love this card just because it says when your Vanguard attack hits, you can retire him to then draw a card and then countercharge. So I really like this just because you do get to draw a card afterwards. So Unlike Gojo, this card actually replaces itself, which is really nice. But yeah, it does have to be like on a like separate regard circle, whereas Gojo has to boost the Vanguard, which has its downsides but also benefits. But I'll get to that later. But I do feel like with Gojo and Ethan, you've got a good amount of countercharge in the deck to help keep going with your Overlord skills, basically. So yeah, so 2 copies of Ethan is pretty nice. So that's it for the grade 2s. So for the grade 1s, of course, first of all, we're going to start with 4 copies of the Perfect Guard, the Twin Buckler Dragon. So like I said with the Keta Sanctuary deck, the PGs are going to be seeing a reprint in set 6, which is pretty handy, so don't worry too much about these. But yeah, it's just the better one in that you can guard with it if you have one or less cards in hand without a discard, basically. So yeah, so 4 copies of those. Then for the other grade 1s, I've actually gone for a bit of a mixture on grade 1s just because I couldn't decide on how many of what I wanted to do. So first of all, I'm doing 2 copies of Madoka. I really like Madoka just because it's a really nice booster. It's a 10k booster that you could use for your Vanguard or your Reguards if needed. But also, it's a good shield as well. It can either become a 10k or a 15k shield for the late game, which is actually pretty good because, you know, that's where you want to get to, right? Because you want to get to turn 4 so that you can ride the end. And Madoka could be that extra shield value to help you get there. But if you don't need the shield, he could also just be a good booster or sometimes even an attacker, because he is a 10k, so that's actually not too bad. So I decided to go for 2 copies of him, and then I decided to go for 2 copies of Bar, just because I do like him as a Reguard as well, in that he's a good booster. And also, he gets an extra 5k when your Vanguard hits something. Now, that is only a once per turn, so he can't go to, like, you know, 18. But a 13k boost is pretty respectable, you know. Unlike a Nahalam, that'll make Nahalam like 28, which is pretty good. And then with Burning Horn, that'll make it 33. So yeah, not too bad. So I like the extra 2 bars on the deck just for some boosters. And then the last grade 1 on the deck is going to be the 2 copies of Gojo. I decided to go with the 2 Gojo just because I quite like the idea of using him to boost the end, because if you are in desperate need of that counterblast, you can boost the end, and then if you boost it with the Nahalam skill as well, the end is already 18, and then the Nahalam will make it 23. So a Gojo boost will then pump it up to 31, which is actually pretty nice just because 31's pretty big, and then if they let that attack hit, you do get the counter charge. So if you do end up getting CB denied at any point, you could use this as a pressure outlet to say, hey, if you don't guard this massive attack, I'm going to get a counter charge, and then I can use the end skill again. So yeah. Of course, preferably what you want to be doing in the deck is you want to hold on to your counterblasts at a good rate so that you don't end up being CB denied during your follow-up turn. But the Gojo can be a nice pressure outlet to enable that counter charge to get you that counterblast for the end. So it does come up, so I do like playing the 2 copies of it, along with the Ethan, of course. And now for the triggers. The triggers are actually pretty different this time. There's a bit of a mixture. So first, of course, we have the over trigger with Drag Vector. So of course, with Drag Vector, it's basically just restand the Vanguard. So yeah, people like to joke around with this, saying that it's basically Dragonic Overlord the Trigger, which, let's be fair, is kind of true. But one funny thing with this is that with the end, you can actually have a really deadly over trigger turn if you see this early, because you could give that 100 million to the end, attack with him. So obviously you attack, Twin Drive, get the overtrigger, give the 100 million to the end, restand it from the overtrigger effect, and then attack for 100 million, restand with the end effect, and then attack again. So, yeah, 2 lots of 100 million, pretty good. You know, who needs the start deck one when we can just do this with the end? So, yeah, pretty crazy. So 1 copy of that. And then, of course, we do have to play some critical triggers in the deck. You know, what Overlord deck would be an Overlord deck without critical triggers. So we're playing 4 copies of the skill crit, and we're doing 3 copies of the vanilla crit. So I actually decided to go for 7 crit in total. I think 7's fine. You can do 8 if you want to. But there's actually a reason for this, in that I decided to go a little bit different with my trigger lineup here. So that's it for the crits. So to go over the other triggers, I have 2 copies of the draw, and then I'm playing 2 copies of the front trigger. So I'm playing these for different reasons, in that the draw trigger is a nice, obviously, draw outlet. to help see more pieces, and also have extra cards in hand for card advantage, so that you can discard for the Overlord effects, right? So you could see things like your Burner Dragons through the draw triggers, which is pretty cool. But then also, I like the fronts just because since you are attacking with the Vanguard a lot, your rear guards can actually get a passive increase from the front trigger, and also the front triggers are 20k shields, which are really, really good. So again, this is sort of in the same mindset as Madoka, in that it helps you get to the late game by having that large shield value. So I quite like the 2-2 split right now. I feel like if you want to go one or the other, either way is fine if you want to just focus on draw or front. But I actually quite like the idea of having just the 7 crit in the deck with the 2-2 split of these. I think that's actually pretty cool, and I think it's a bit more fun as well, because it has a bit more flavor to the triggers now, I think. So yeah. So that's it for those, and then of course finally we have the 2 copies of the new heal trigger from set 5, and 2 copies of the vanilla heal trigger with the 15k shield. So decided to go for 2-2 split of these as well, just because this comes in handy for the multi-attack decks, which there are a couple in my local area, so I don't mind playing this. And also the 15k base shield, just because, you know, it's 15. The new one is 10, so I do like to have the biggest shield just in case I need it. So yeah, 2-2 split with these is fine with me. But yeah, that is it for the deck profile, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been enjoying Dragonic Overlord quite a bit, so I'm really happy that they decided to bring the End back into OverDress as well. Like I said, it's a very iconic unit, and I just love this guy's artwork so much. He just looks really, really cool. And yeah, the deck playstyle is kind of the same, but you've got a couple of different avenues to look down, and you got to make sure that your resources are being spent correctly, which I kind of like. And like I said, the trigger lineup in this deck I really like, just because it's a bit of a mixture, and you don't know what to expect really, so I kind of like that. But yeah, tell me guys what you think about the deck in the comments below. I'll have the deck log in the description as always, and yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. So until I see you guys in the next video, this is Guardian 25 signing out.